Today's guest is Mr. Ade Richardson. Ade is a filmmaker, also a producer of films and a writer of films. So I want to introduce him and we'll take it from there. Ade.
Hey, Ian. Thank you for inviting me to your show. I'm happy to be here. Excited for the conversation.
Couldn't think of a better person to start this venture off with than you. Can you just give us a brief background, personally as well as professionally?
Sure. Let's see where to start. Well, I'm a filmmaker, also a writer, and I started making. Yeah, I started with acting. Growing up in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, New York, and there's in my neighborhood there was a lot of mixed diversity. There's so many characters in Brooklyn, especially in Crown Heights, and at one of the things that we used to do as kids were we'd be creative in the city at that time in the 80s, where there was a big drug epidemic, and so our parents didn't want us out on the street too much, especially in the later later time in the day. So we spent, it was a dangerous neighborhood. So we spent a good deal of time just being creative. In Crown Heights, there wasn't a lot of nature or parks around. So what we would do is, we put on performances, dancing and singing, coming up with new dances and things like that. And I noticed at that age that I really enjoyed to perform in front of an audience. So my first venture into filmmaking was as a kid, first with acting, and I eventually got into theater. And my first play I was ever in was Oliver. I don't know if you're familiar with the play.
Somewhat.
Yeah. So
yes, I am.
Yeah, and my dad at that time, he got me the VHS cassette. I don't think they have those nowadays, but I watched it, and I was just taken aback. I was really, really loved that play, and I forget what role I was. I wasn't an Oliver. I was one of the kids that was selling flowers. So I would sing a song, "Who Will Buy These Beautiful Roses?" And I don't know if whoever's familiar with the play might remember that, but fast forward, I eventually started putting on films using my sisters. We didn't have a camera. I would just pretend that I had a camera. And, I remember one memory of my sisters climbing up. I told them they have to climb up a dirt hill, and I would throw dirt onto them. This was after the film Jurassic Park came out. And they were younger sisters, so they were hesitating, and I would pit one against the other. I would say, well, if you don't do it, then she's my assistant, the other sister. And I would throw worms and dirt and film, and that's when the idea of making films came to me at that time. So that's what I do now. That's what I love. That's my passion. And I now it's funny talking about kids and that freedom to create. I think it's very important, and that's why I really appreciate what you're doing, Ian, and bringing bringing art and film as using it as a tool for teaching, and because creativity and the having the opportunity to be playful and to be creative is so important. I think it goes hand in hand with learning. Yeah, I think it was Einstein that was asked the question, what's the most important thing? You know, I forget exactly what the question was, but he said his number one thing, the reason why he is where he was at that time was because of creativity more than anything else. You know, he didn't do great in all of his classes, but he just had a great imagination and he was creative. And having kids involved in film, and the reason I'm also focusing on film, on kids as well, um, is because I have kids myself, and we have been doing these kids series, you know, and I'll send you some of them, Ian. Maybe it's something we can talk about as well. But it's a kind of a comedy sort of sketches that we do that implement there are some messages there, and some sort of a little bit of what do they call it? Like a satire sort of comedy. There's some sarcasm, but you know, it's a good way to get my kids involved in the learning process and in being creative. So.
We're going to get into the family issue, the fatherhood issue, because I think it's very relevant, very germane to our conversation, because we're talking about doing something that springs not from just from the head, but also from the heart. And you talk about, passion. You know, I know you're passionate about your kids, your family, about young people as a whole. But I just want to get a firm understanding of your credentials, so the world will know that you are a bona fide, certified, highly trained filmmaker. Where'd you go to school?
Well, I originally majored in psychology at Clark University, and I took some theater classes there.
You mean
And
Clark, the HBCU?
Clark University is in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's
Not Clark, Atlanta.
no.
Okay.
It's one of the top schools for psychology.
I see.
Yeah, so I went there, and then I moved back to New York. And psychology, I'm fascinated with the mind and why we are the way that we are. But you know, my passion was filmmaking, and I got my degree from Brooklyn College in film production. You know, took a lot of screenwriting courses, advanced cinematography, directing, and film studies. And I really enjoy Brooklyn College has, they call it the NYU the NYU of Brooklyn. You know,
I heard it as the poor man's Harvard.
yeah, it's a
Yeah,
fantastic school.
but yeah, a thought just came to my mind. How does your psychology training inform your art or your filmmaking, whether it's your writing, your directing, your producing?
The short answer is I'm not sure. I've always been fascinated in why we are, or why I am the way that I am. I'm always asking the question, why, and wanting to investigate truth. You know, what's the truth? What's here? What's the motive behind why I react in certain ways, and or other people react in certain ways? What's the driving force? And like peeling an onion, I like going deeper and deeper. And I think part of that, there's the science part that my background in psychology, where I derive that from. But even more than that, I have a strong, uh, I gravitated to spirituality, meditation, and things of this sort. Carl Jung, also a great teacher of mine. I like the teachings of Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, and these guys, and how it relates or how it influences my filmmaking is, I use art to search for truth. I'm and it starts with the script. So when I'm writing a script, I often begin with free writing, even before I get to the script stage. I just do free writing. I let whatever comes out. It's not structured. It's not organized. I can barely read it after I write it. It's just like scribble on a paper. But it's a way of getting things out that's sort of that's in the subconscious mind, and I get it out, and then oftentimes I'll start to focus on a character, and I will begin to see certain themes. So it's a way of self-discovery through a character, um, and it's useful because when we're doing self-discovery, sometimes there's a tendency to take it personal, and when it's very personal, it may come with it some fear, fear of, okay, my sense of self is being threatened, or some self-judgment and things of that nature. So using the tool of film and characters, um, kind of in a way, if you think of something like, if you were doing something like, let's say a self inventory on yourself, then you're just putting down the facts, almost like a news reporter would report something. This is, these are the facts of the situation. This is point A led to B led to C. And so filmmaking is a good tool, I find, to be able to do that, because then you create some distance. And this is helpful for the artist, the writer, the creator of the work. And it also helps the audience to take in things that might be difficult to take in. When we're watching it in a film, it might be easier. You can present certain questions that may still cause some discomfort, but because it's on a film, it's a little bit easier to take. Like a perfect example is of race, so there's obviously racism in the world still today. And for someone to question maybe their own prejudice, to be able to look at these things, it may be difficult to just sit there. They may have no desire to look within, but if you watch a film and you're empathizing and you're connecting with the character, and the character is questioning these morals and things, and maybe negative or false beliefs within himself, you're on the journey with the character, then it's like a safe space for you to also question. And you might not be consciously realizing this, but the film is actually doing this. So you're getting this message, you're doing this inventory, and I think that can't help to be a positive thing in society, or else we're just reacting without having any sort of consciousness of who we are and of, what's going on, what are our belief systems, what are, what's going on within ourselves. So.
So you brought us some pretty salient points, and I think it's a good time to bring out a concept, if you will, that went through my mind as you were talking, because we're trying to focus here on, to a certain extent, on the use of film in the classroom. And I get what you're saying, and certainly films do that. It's almost like as you watch, you're able to at least maybe in secret be able to identify. You see another character's faults, you're able to identify your own. There's a safe space there that you don't have to expose yourself to other people. You can keep it within. But if we were going to, if our plan is to use a film in the classroom to help students do just that, to look within, can we just show the film? How, in other words, how would we use the film to be effective? To, let's say, if a kid is having if a student is having some sort of problem, issues, or if there's a particular theme or concept or topic that you want to address in a particular viewing session, how do you see it being handled by the teacher? What would you, if your child were being shown a film, what would your expectations be? Is there anything, any recommendations, any thoughts, any ideas?
Well, it's a good question. How to implement it. I guess what comes to me. So I ask myself, what rings true to. Yeah, I'm going. I'm like I'm having a flashback to when I was in school and the things that the school would show me in terms of certain videos and things of that nature. And that was quite some time ago. That was like probably like 30 or more years ago. So to be quite honest, when they showed those videos, a lot of I probably fell asleep during a lot of them. We I was always excited when they would show a film because it would mean we'd have less classwork to do, and we can just kind of watch. So I like that part, but the film choices weren't really engaging. So that's number one. You have to, just because they're in school doesn't mean that we don't want to engage the audience. So like as a filmmaker, I want to have your attention. I want you to be invested in it. If it is a sort of historical depiction of some event, the Civil War or whatever, with someone narrating in a very monotone voice while they show a few images taken out of a textbook, it can put some kids to sleep because you're dealing with teenagers, who they're going through hormones and all these different things, and they get tired sitting in the classroom. They're probably not getting enough sleep as it is. A lot of times they have, especially nowadays, kids have short attention spans. So I don't think, I think we have to have something that can grab their attention, and coming up with creative ways to do that, kind of thinking outside of the box. And so one of the things I think is really important is being honest. Uh, if we spell out everything, and this is, going back to what I respected and appreciated from my teachers growing up, it was the teachers that were really honest. They didn't spoon feed me everything. They taught you to think and to ask questions. Now, teenagers especially, they can see right through anyone trying to manipulate them, especially nowadays. Kids are they have the internet, they have more information than we had, and it's at their fingertips and they get it instantly. So they're very knowledgeable about certain things. Doesn't mean that they have the wisdom and life experience, but they do have some information and knowledge. So I think being honest with them, being authentic through the film, and not spelling it out to them or not telling them this is how you should think, but more of having films that teach them to think. You know, teaching kids to think, I think is really important. To question, and I think that both can be done with films that leave some room that for discussion. So it doesn't spell everything out to you, but it leaves room for now you and the teacher can now have a discussion. And now there's some kids that may think differently, and there's another kid that thinks this way, and having an open dialogue. And the teacher is kind of just there to be the moderator, to facilitate this, and to get the kids discussing it. And I think that is essential nowadays because we're living in a very polarized climate, a lot of division, where views and perspectives are not respected. If you have a view that's opposed to someone else's, we use intimidation, we shut the person out, we condemn them, we judge them, and so there's no room to grow. There's no room to learn. And I'm sure you've heard the saying, if you know everything, then how are you going to learn?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with conflict. Healthy conflict is good. But if we approach conflict with the attitude of, I don't know, or I should
Mhm.
say, or I'm not sure if the right word is conflict or confrontation, if we approach it with the idea of, I don't know. I'm open to a wider perspective. And I think films, especially nowadays, they're able to provide a space, a platform for further discussion.
How would you use the film? Would you play it and then start to ask questions of the students to get them thinking, get them talking, get them discussing, what happened, what the facts are, how they feel, so on and so forth? Or do you just let it roll, and at the end of the classroom, they go on their merry way, free to come up with their own conclusions, or do you guide them to guide them through a process? What would you how do you see it?
I would say, and this is going back to my film studies day time, when I took film history classes, one of the things I enjoyed and found I learned a lot from is when we'd watch a film
Mhm.
and and then there would be a discussion. So the professor would would be the moderator and ask certain questions, and I would learn from other students who would share their perspective on it, you know. And I think that sort of that way of engaging it, of learning from each other, of being open to other students' views, then you take on more than your perspective. Then it creates a wider sort of consciousness where my filter is my filter, the way that I view the world, which is influenced from my past, my upbringing, my ancestry, and things of this nature. Whereas some other person who might be of a different ethnic group or gender, or has their own filter, and they're bringing another perspective to the table. So I can learn from that. And if I learn even a small, or just by understanding their perspective, I don't have to agree. Just by understanding, I create a wider world. I create it just expands my consciousness, my view, my perspective.
Yeah. Thank you for your response. I think about how entertainment oriented our society, our culture, is. We look more to, of course, this is all arguable, but we seem to look more towards being entertained, being made to feel good, than we do towards being informed or to be taught, whatever life lessons we need to learn, particularly young people. There is a definite lack of, information, usable information, transportable information. When I say transportable information, information that will take them into adulthood, that they can use and apply, because they're so inundated with entertainment. Do you think there is a way to, or do you have to sort of like build entertainment into an educational film? Do you have to be anything you present that you might want to use to teach? Do you have to also make it entertaining? Where does entertainment stop and education begin? What's going on there?
Yeah, I do think there needs to be a level of entertainment to hold the kids' attention. Even I mean, not even outside of film. If you're a teacher and you're not somewhat, I mean, the teacher, part of what teaching is, and my dad's a professor, so he's talked to me about this, and I've watched him. I've been in his classes. Part of it is entertaining. You're performing, and as they say, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So we're entertaining, and it also, when you're watching something that you see, is you're if the filmmaker is making the art with passion, and enthusiasm, if that's coming out in the work, then the viewer, the audience, the teenagers, the students are going to pick up on that. So I think it's important. And you brought up a really good point in this question, where kids are, and not just kids and adults, but I know we're focusing on kids. they're watching films, and whether it's films, music, or other things, to be entertained and not as much to learn, and that's not an absolute, but there's for a
Mhm.
good deal. And I think what that speaks to is our desire for, in terms of filmmaking and just the way that we are as humans, is our desire to know. First of all, we all have a desire for comfort and safety. That's the way the brain neuroscientist Bu Lotto does a lot of work on the science behind this. Our brains are set up to for certainty. The brain, it wants to know what's the next thing. And that's the way, or else as a species, we wouldn't have survived. So it wants to know what's down the road. And so, and in a way that works to our detriment in the modern age where, we have shelter, we have our basic needs met, but we still have a brain that is ultra sensitive to these things. So it's always looking to survive, even though we have our needs met and things of this nature. So it's the brain is looking for certainty. And so this comes into play, and film producers, those guys in Hollywood that are making these films, there's a science behind it. They know when the arc is supposed to be. They're fulfilling a need that the viewer is looking for in the film. So there's a certain arc. The hero's on his journey. The hero has a conflict, and you as a viewer, we're watching, and we know, and we're afraid, and we're feeling discomfort because there's a little bit of uncertainty, but we know that there is going to be a solution at a certain point. And um, so we're looking for that. So it's really what the films nowadays are doing in Hollywood and the music industry as well, is they're fulfilling a certain psychological uh, biological need that we all have innate. It's a primal thing. And so they're kind of capitalizing on it. So there's not as much of a need to create art and to create films that uplifts society. It's more of kind of like a addict, looking to get the hit at this, to quench the thirst, to get what they need, to get the fix, and so unfortunately, this is what they do with our kids too, through the music, through and now it's at such a fast rate, because they get instant gratification, and now our social media, there's algorithms, there's a whole science, and Silicon Valley uses this to pull the teenagers in to get them glued on the phone and to manipulate them. They don't want them to be away from the phone, you know. So I think one of the important things as teachers and educators is we have to now bring ethics into this, and it might be mean that yes, the entertainment, but also stepping out of the box and doing things that may make the kids feel a little bit of discomfort because it's working another muscle. They're not getting everything spoon fed to them right when they want it to, because we want them to come, in my opinion, we want them to learn, we want them to question. And so to be able to question and to be able to take on new information means to step into that place of uncertainty. And as I had mentioned earlier, the brain is developed to seek certainty. So, so if we're just feeding them entertainment alone, then we're going to leave them in that realm of certainty and comfort. Whereas I think as teachers, we want to bring them into this place of uncertainty, which can feel a little bit uncomfortable. And it can be a little, it may work, it may force them to work a muscle in that regard. But I think the benefits will be that they will learn something new, that they, something new about themselves, something new about the world, something that really they can feel in their being, that they leave the classroom and it's still with them. If it's just entertainment, then it's usually just gone right away. You leave the movie theater, it's the romantic comedy. You don't think anything about it the next day. You're not pondering on these deep thoughts and stuff. But when there's a film that you feel like, oh, that it you're thinking about it, it's, and you're talking to people about it. Now that's a good film. And I think we can do that in the classrooms, so.
Mhm. I hear you. Um, you have a situation where both sides are fighting for the students' minds. On one hand, you have the Disneys, the HBOs, entertainment companies. Maybe I shouldn't single anyone out, but we know that the average person would rather be entertained than be educated. You know, being educated is incidental to entertainment. Um, but in the classroom, for a teacher, her job, her mission, or his goal is to provide an education. Um, so I'm thinking that entertainment, it's a nice to have and should always be a nice to have and the educational component is must have, you know. So how would a teacher now, you get a boring piece of film that you have to use because the educational content and value is tremendous, regardless of the fact that it's not entertainment. You have to present that. You need that as a tool to help you as an educator impart to your students what you want them to learn. Where do we go from here? How would a teacher, implement, in that situation?
So if there's this, and I don't want to, make any absolutes here, because there are, like, let's say you have some science, and you're talking about, there's a video that shows, it's talking about atoms or something of a sort. Now there are some kids that may be fascinated by this,
Mhm.
and may really enjoy it, but we want to also get the attention of the kids that may struggle with it a little bit. They're not really fascinated by atoms and molecules and things of this sort. So yeah, the teacher, I think, has to find a way to make it entertaining. And I think one way to do that is to get the students involved, have classroom discussion, get those students involved that as a teacher, they're not really interested, or they have, maybe it's, and maybe it's not that they're not interested, it's maybe that They have, maybe a learning, disability, or a hard time absorbing certain stuff. Or some kids are better with math, some kids are better with English. So I think most teachers um, have a good idea of who they're dealing with. And I think getting that student who's not really interested or who has a hard time with the material, finding some creative way to get them involved while also not being careful not to embarrass them, especially in the middle school, high school setting, where an embarrassment is like death to a student. I mean, it's the worst thing.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing that you can do, is for be put on the spot in front of other classmates. But I think that's up to the teacher to be creative with. And yeah, there are going to be films that are be packed full of good information, but aren't entertaining, like this teaching film right here, Not As Tough As You Think.
We're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to
Okay.
that. I saw that back there,
Yeah.
and we're gonna flesh that one out a little bit. But I wanted to bring this out there, so to speak, that maybe our concern for entertainment, or thinking about that dichotomy, entertainment versus educating, is not all that valid. Maybe it's about being engaging, as opposed to looking for something to entertain. How am I going to use this film and make it as engaging as possible? How, as a teacher, how am I going to be engaged? How am I going to promote engagement, of my students with the film? So that just came to me that, maybe we might be overemphasizing the need for film to be entertaining, as opposed to finding ways to make it engaging and get the students involved, which brings us back to one of the main or primary values of a film, and that would be to generate, a discussion. Hence, the word becomes valid again, to engage students in a discussion about, a particular topic, which now might be a good point to talk about the film that's represented by the poster behind you, Not As Tough As You Think. Maybe you can sort of give the audience a little backgrounder on this particular film. And then we're going to talk about, maybe get a little specific, how we could, teachers can use this particular film as a means of engaging students in or steering them in a particular direction, and engage them in a discussion of some of the concepts that this film might embody.
Sure. Yeah. This film in particular, I think, is a good one to make that point. And by the way, Ian is the writer producer for this film, and that's how we originally met. And
And you're the filmmaker, you're the director.
yeah,
So
yeah. The,
you're very humble. You're very, what is it, self-effacing? But I'll take it. Thank
yeah.
you.
So this was, and this is one of the things that attracted me to this film, is some of the themes that the film, some of the questions in
And
it.
we're talking about the short film, Not As Tough As You Think.
Exactly.
Right.
So Not As Tough As You Think is basically a film about peer pressure That's one of the main themes. And making, are we going to decide to do what we may feel is morally right? Or are we going to decide to do what our peers, or what the, what our peers or other people think that we should do, or what we think that they think that we should do, So, and I think it's important because you sometimes hear a story of, and there's a lot of instances of mob mentality where, your friends start to do something that is not right, but you do it rather than to feel, to appear weak, or to, get disapproval. And especially as teenagers and adolescents, we're always seeking approval from our peers. We want to, I mean, that's one of the, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is this pyramid in psychology, where we all have these different levels of needs that we need in development. And one of those needs is the need to belong. I think that's like midway in the period or somewhere up there. And it's essential for our development. If we don't have that need to belong, then we're going to seek that sort of unfulfilled need in ways that are unhealthy. One of the ways are drugs, alcohol, different addictions come out of this. There's so many different ways that we try to get this need met. And so, and as obviously as teenagers, adolescents, chances are we're not conscious of this. So this film really captures captures that we have this need to have this fulfilled. So the characters, and I don't want to give away the film, but there's a situation where this is being represented. There's a scenario where the main character, the hero, has Laverne, that's the main character's name. He's in a situation where he has a choice to make. Is he going to go along with his friends or not? So he has to make is he going to choose what's morally right? The morals that maybe his family has passed down to him, or is he going to go along with his friends? So I'm not going to give an answer to it. You watch the film, but ultimately, this film is perfect for. It's a really good film for a classroom setting because it talks to kids that are around that age group. So I think that they can identify with what the character is, the situation that he's in. They might have been in similar situations. And then the teacher can then ask questions. Then there can be a discussion. There's an altercation that takes place, that we see on screen. So that on-screen altercation, the teacher could ask, do you think that character was right in getting into this little altercation? Now, some kids may say, yeah, this person disrespected him. And then other kids may say, no, they weren't in the right. And then the teacher can, facilitate a open discussion and, kind of dive into that and ask questions from there.
Which theme would you say is most salient in this particular film, Not as Tough as You Think? There's a theme of gun violence. There's also the theme of, victims, impacts on families, that sort of things, on the relationships between parent and son. There are themes relevant to incarceration, consequences, for our actions, accountability. Um, would you, when a film presents with all these possible themes, would you then say it should be um, reused over and over, or should we just stick with using it for in one particular area, maybe that area in which it's strongest? Um,
Yeah, a good question, and I would say a film like this can be used, in my opinion, over and over. It's just like you know, in maybe English class, you might read a Tolstoy book. I forget one like Anna Karenina or something like that. And there's so many themes in that book. So the teacher is not focusing on one of them. There's so many different things you can learn. So I would say this film can be broken down, and you can, not that you have to rewatch the film over and over, maybe certain parts of it, but I do think that I think it would be useful to get as much as you can out of it.
mhm,
Like talk about all of those themes. As many. They're all very important themes, and they all leave room for deep discussion that you can get into. So
yeah. Why do you think that film is is important? First of all, do you think um, film enhances or to a dramatic degree the educational process? Or do you think it's just, a little icing on the cake? Um, I can tell you right off the bat, I'm hoping as, as a writer, producer, filmmaker, I'm hoping, and I do believe that there is a lot that a 15-minute short film or a 5-minute film, depending on how it's written, what its intent or its theme is, can really bring tremendous value to the educational process or the mission of an educator or a teacher. You know, that's what I think. What about you? What do you think about the value, the true value of a film?
yeah, I think it's very valuable, and I think it's only going to become more valuable, especially in the world that we live in today, where we're doing you know, a large part of our teaching is being done through Zoom and things of this sort. So the I think that it's important, in my opinion, to continue to be inter to be imaginative, to do it in more interesting ways, in how we incorporate film into into teaching. But I don't think it's going away. I think it's only going to be become more valuable now. I could tell you, my dad is a professor at Boston University, and he uses filmed, and we're actually going to be doing I'm going to help him to put together some films, and we've talked about that. But it's a big part of how he teaches. So from and I know colleagues of his use it as well. So and they find it very helpful. And so I think it is, and it's not anything new per se in terms of using film or like entertainment of a sorts to help educate. You know, we've been doing this for hundreds of years. Humans have been using storytelling as a way to bring messages as a learning tool. You know, it's just now with technology, we're just evolving with the technology and with the type of humans that we have now, you know, and uh, and nowadays kids, you know, are on iPhones and they're looking at film all the time. They're looking at videos all the time. So now, I think it would only make sense to, in some ways, incorporate film more in the classroom setting.
I see. Um, do you, how do you, how do you see the production of films being approached? Would you say that it's more important that the film from the its conceptual stage have as a purpose, education. In other words, should a film for the most part. I'm sure you can. There are a lot of films that were intended for the for theatrical release that you can extrapolate certain social significance, so certain themes that you can talk about or present, if not viewing the entire hour and a half film, which would be very difficult to do in a 45-minute, 50-minute classroom period. You can, some of them, only a certain portion of it is, viable, So if we're talking about, using a short film, would you suggest that that films be specifically written and produced and authored for the classroom or the educational marketplace?
I think that's a great question, and that's something I've thought about as well. So should the film be tailored for a classroom setting, from at the before the conception of the film? And I think, yeah, and it should, to a certain extent. Like you mentioned, the length of the film. Also, having, it has to be PG. So so those sort of things need to be tailored and worked out. And there's certain and we also have to consider, if the film is going to be offensive to certain people as well. So we, there's different things to consider, taken into account. So yeah, I think to a certain extent, that needs to be known, because if you're intending to use the film to show to adolescents or even younger kids, elementary school kids, teenager kids, I think you have to take that into account, And then there's the practical reasons. If you are making films that are geared to kids and you're not taking that into account, then practically you might just be wasting money, because you're making certain films and then they have to be vetted, and certain ones are not going to be of use because maybe there was profanity, or maybe there was certain things that weren't be acceptable to parents, for their kids to watch. So both for practical reasons as well. Now, that being said, I think there's a careful balance that needs to be used. Yes, it needs to be PG-13. There's certain things that need to be in place so that you can use it to show kids or teenagers so it's tailored for the demographic, the school demographic and age demographic that you're gonna show it to. At the same time, as an artist, you just as important is having something that is authentic, because I think those sort of films will resonate more with the audience. So I think having something that is truthful and authentic, as well as being appropriate, for the classroom setting. And so it's a sort of a balancing act, in how you do it. There was that film you showed me recently. I forget the name of it, which was really brilliant. The film was basically a child, probably, I don't know what age he was in. I would say maybe, let's say, fourth grade. So he was coming to school late, you know, and each time he came into the classroom late, the teacher would take a ruler, tell him to put his hand out, and would hit him on the hand with the ruler, and it hurt. And the kid would walk and sit down. So he walked into the classroom again. He kept getting hit in the hand with a ruler. This was as a discipline. And by the way,
Maybe.
yeah, by the way, this wasn't made in the West
Yeah,
because
it's a different culture. Yeah.
yeah, that film would not have been allowed,
Right.
So this was in a different country. I forget what country it was from.
Hmm.
But anyway, the one day the teacher was on his way to the classroom, and he saw that kid who he's always hitting on the hand, the kid who's always late. And the kid was pushing, it looked like a classmate, another kid in a wheelchair.
I think it was wasn't it an elderly person? I
It
think
was
so.
either an elderly person or, yeah, it could have been,
Yeah.
but
Like a grandfather or something like that.
he was transferring, he was pushing this person in a wheelchair, getting this person to wherever they needed to go. So he was doing some sort of service. And it was right at the time where he would have been late. So
Hmm.
the teacher realized that this kid is late every day because he's pushing, he's doing this service. He's helping, so he's being compassionate. He's helping someone else out. So, the moral of the story, the student comes in this time and the kid puts his hand out without the teacher even asking, and the teacher puts the ruler on the kid's hand and then gives the kid a big hug, realizing that, that he was this compassionate. So that's a balance, but except for the hidden on the hand, you couldn't do that in the West, but in that culture it was acceptable. But there was that balance of having the message there, and there was no profanity, no like things like that. It's probably a bad example for the West again because of the ruler hidden, but the message was very simple and it was very clear, and it's something that can be used as you can have a big discussion, about a film like that. And it's entertainment. It engaged me right away because you empathize with the character, and you're on this journey with them, and so yeah.
Yeah. What the area that really fascinates me when it comes to, you know, even thinking about how to use film in the educational process is in terms of values, teaching values. We talked about, in so many words, teaching compassion, understanding. This is a particularly, um, let's say, fertile area for film to come into play, because I think over its history, film has always, touched on human interest, human qualities, as opposed to it being something that's used for STEM. It can be used for that, also teaching science and technology, for teaching, the three, what we used to say back in the days, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I'm really fascinated for, in terms of its use to in areas that undergird, because there are a lot of, let's face it, there are a lot of smart kids, very smart kids. However, that does not, come to fruition. You don't see that because you may have some behavioral problems. You might have some attitudinal problems. You might just have a situation where the kid just doesn't know. Doesn't come from a household where certain qualities were reinforced and emphasized. And I see that as an area in which film can play a huge role. Um, Talk to that subject, if you will.
So in terms of film being used to encourage compassion, empathy, and things of that nature, yeah, I do think it's fertile ground now. Obviously, our country is going through, a difficult period, not only with the pandemic, but there's very strong division and a lot of lack of being able to put oneself in the other person's shoes, and making the other person, the knee-jerk reaction is demonizing one another, hateful speech, yeah. So there's not a lot of compassion and out there on demonstrated on social media, demonstrated on the news, even our news, as well, can get into that role of having a lack of compassion in some ways. So our young people are, that's the examples that they're looking at, and that they're learning from. And so we need something to counter that, another way, and films can do just that, and it's just through stories. And basically, a story is taking something that might have a circumstance that may happen in real life, and acting it out and putting it, filming it, and so it's putting the story there. And there's films that do that very well. And one of the films I saw recently with my kids was Soul. It's a Pixar film with a really deep message. It's a beautiful film, and really the main character his dream is to become a musician, and really he's so passionate, and that's all that he wants to do. But he meets someone else who is from like another world, who never experienced what it's like to be human. And so this person has a chance to experience just being human, and how magnificent it is to experience life, to see colors, to smell, have the senses, to be able to smell fragrances, to taste food. So all the things that this musician took for granted because of the tunnel vision of, I just have to get this. If I don't get this, then I'm not fulfilled as a human being. Then my life basically is worthless and is of no value. And so when this friend that he meets that is enjoying this experience, that he begins to have compassion because this friend has to go back to this other world where he doesn't get to experience the full range of emotions and what it's like to be human. So the message there is, to kind of be grateful for what you have, and also being able to put yourself in another like the grass. We always think the grass is greener on the other side. And so, there's a great message in that for kids. And so
Mhm.
films can do this. They can, in terms of, I think compassion begins with giving our attention to another person, opening our ears and listening and trying to understand with an open mind. And that's a skill that we kind of lose along the way growing up because we learn it's better to, we got to be right. It's me against you. The person first wins. The one who has more of this is the better person of more value. So we begin to take on a certain value system that doesn't, at the core of it, isn't about compassion. It's about power, money, things of that nature, being right. And so and compassion also begins at home. Are we taught when we're upset, do our parents listen or do they make us wrong for having emotions? If we learn that emotions are not, that if we take on the idea that our emotions aren't good, that then we learn to suppress, we learn to ignore how we're feeling. If we don't have the freedom to express how we feel with a parent or with a loved one. And so if we don't feel that safety, then to express our emotions, then as a way to stay safe, we suppress, we repress. Now, that comes up in very unhealthy ways as we develop to adulthood. It's not something that just magically goes away. Film enables us to have an outlet because through that character, we experience our own emotions. It's a safe environment to do it. When the character is feeling a sense of insecurity or fear, we can feel it within ourselves. If the character is feeling some anger, we have a safe place to feel that feeling. Even in, excuse me, in a film, which where there's some emotions which nobody really wants to feel. There's a film recently, Judas and the Black Panthers.
Mhm.
Now, one of the characters, the character who plays Judas, he did terrific job. But you know, he's betraying his people, but he does it in a way where the emotions that are there, the sense of him wanting to feel a sense of security, basic primal instincts that he wanted to feel, but to the point where he is betraying his people, he's betraying his brothers and sisters. but the audience could relate to these feelings. You know, they have experienced it. Everyone has experienced it in some way. And it goes back to the moral choice. You know, do we choose to make the morally sound decision, or do we choose to just save ourselves? You know, and that film also speaks to the wider, broader issue that we're dealing with in our culture is where so much about the that rugged individualism, where we need to start thinking about community, about the we, you know. And that's why film is a good place where we can talk about the we can talk about compassion, we can talk about the need for community and things of this nature.
Point, or should I say good points. What I hear from a lot of teachers is that the classroom is almost like a battleground these days, you know, and teaching, as noble a profession as it is, it's been devalued. You know, it's not given the respect that it deserves. Um, and I would think that a lot of that is as a result of some of the messages, or many of the messages that we hear in the music, that we hear in the videos, films, magazines, on the radio, um, the lyrics in the songs. So there, you know, there's a lot that a teacher has to contend with, because there's a lot of issues that students, you know, bring into the classroom, all those things that's floating, those ideas. I once heard someone say that, and he was talking about himself. He was saying, I was miseducated by the miseducated. And I know we don't like to cast aspersions on people, you know, particularly young people. But let's face it, a lot of people are coming into the classroom ill prepared in terms of, you know, values. I've heard that, you know, a lot of the kids come into the classroom to be entertained as opposed to be taught. You mentioned the term counter, but I'm going to bring that together with another word, message, counter messaging. Do you think that films, there's a need for counter messaging to be an active part of the classroom activity, especially coming from the teacher?
So I think what's coming up for me is to try to meet them where they are. Um, so I'm not sure about counter messaging per se. Um, so
Yeah,
I mean,
what I mean is that a lot of the stuff comes from, you know, the messages that they get. And honestly speaking, a lot of the messages that the kids are getting, or the students are getting, are questionable at best. You know, can we use film to counter those messages? The same medium, you know, that's, let's say, putting out a lot of the negative messages. Can we use that same medium in a different way to counter that, to balance it, to even fight against it? And how would a teacher use a film? You know, for instance, you remember that, I don't, was it Pink Floyd, teacher, leave those kids alone, they don't need no education. You know, and I wonder how many people, how many kids took that to heart, and formulated or came up with a very, very um, self-destructive idea of education, when they're hearing this from one of the most powerful rock groups ever. Um, that's power.
Yeah.
Do you think that that same inherent power of film videos can be used, to counteract everything? I think it can be. That's my goal, to use it to do that. But what do you think about that?
So I think what I would start with is have, I think, we have to first really have treat the children or the teenagers with respect. That's number one. And when I say what respect is they are they're getting a lot of information. So the teenagers are usually in a sort of rebellious stage. They're rebelling, what, because they're in they're forming their own sense of self. They're forming their identity. So they're, in a way, they're rebelling. This is like a stage that kids go through, and so that's one thing. And yes, they are getting messages from music and films and things of that nature that can be very negative, and can end up causing them harm and others harm, and not very helpful to society. So how can we counter that? See, one of the issues I find in the school system is because kids have a lot of access to information nowadays, and they pick up on hypocrisy really, really quickly. So they could smell when we're being hypocritical, and they don't have, in some ways, they've lost respect in our school system because they know that the history is not what it actually is. They know that that they've been taught a history that is not factual, that's not accurate, and there are certain demographics, certain genders and race where you're looking at it and they're only showing one race that is kind of the hero throughout history, and another race that isn't talked much about that. So when they come into the classroom, they're coming today with not the trust that they may have had some years ago. Now everything's on the internet. The curtain has been pulled. We are getting a lot of the information, and kids know this probably to a certain extent. There are some kids that have more information than some of the adults because it's at their fingertips. So I think first we have to be knowledgeable about that and show films that are more speak to truth, that are more accurate with what is going on with the history, with what is going on in the world, and not just this fluff that shows, kind of romanticizes a certain idea of what reality, of the reality that we're living in now. And I think if you do that, then you can counter, because you got to first get them engaged. You got to I think we got to get their trust back and have to have them a little bit willing to give us their attention, be open to it. Because if we're showing them the same stuff that we showed them 10, 15, 20 years ago, chances are they're just, I don't,
Right.
they know it. They know the game. They know the game, and they're not going to fall for it. So they can tell when adults are giving them something that doesn't line up of what they know, of what they're reading, you know. Not to say that all the information that they're getting is correct, because they're also getting some inaccurate information as well. You know, you're getting people that are thinking that the world is flat and ridiculous things of that nature as well that we need to
Mhm.
counter, you know. So we need to counter the factual, scientific, accurate. We need to give them accurate information, and it needs to be, I think, done in an authentic, truthful,
Mhm.
honest way, you know, where a very human way, where we are not only showing the rosy side of America or people, but we're showing the parts that maybe people don't want to look at, or that people don't want to acknowledge, you know. And then we could put the message in there, because then where we can get to the compassion, you know, we can get to the empathy, because the compassion and empathy simply are going to come from the characters that we're empathizing with, you know. And to empathize with the character and the subject in the film, we have to be willing to engage. You know, we have, if we're shut off right away, we're not going to be able to empathize and to go through the journey with the character.
I points well taken. As you spoke, I thought about the fact that teachers themselves may need to consider upping their game and being open to what you mentioned at almost at the beginning of our talk. Challenging themselves, doing some more introspection, self-examination, and take a look. So there's probably an even greater market for films that would address the teacher's own need for personal evolution, if you will. You know, because a lot of when you talked about authenticity, um, that's going to hang pretty heavily on the shoulders of the teachers. And a lot of the teachers, because they have sort of insulated themselves and they don't look like the students. And they haven't, I don't think that they've done a good job in trying to identify with them, in trying to empathize, with them. That they, and the way I see it anyway, have not been open to be teachable about, the kids, their culture, what's important to them, the truth, because a lot of times our educational system is part of that structural, in this case, racism, that we might be trying to combat. The kids know this, so they have pretty much have like a block, and they're looking, for hypocrisy. They're looking for inauthenticity. How does the teacher, in order for them to teach anything and be effective at what they do, they themselves are going to have to learn how to be authentic. They themselves are going to have to become compassionate. Just because you're in the class, and there's some wonderful teachers, but there are also a lot of them that are just there to, make a living. So, and for the most part, they're large, good people, but we can always get better. you know we could always improve. We could always evolve. So I would think that there is room for films that demonstrate to teachers, just as we're looking for films that demonstrate to students how to be better people. you know things that will stimulate a conversation among teachers about, their beliefs, their attitudes. Um, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, you bring up a really important, valid point, and I think there's no, I don't know if there's any easy answer to that. First off, I have, uh, I really highly respect and appreciate teachers. Not an
Mhm.
easy job,
So do I.
especially,
Oh,
yeah, especially in today's COVID Zoom. The
yeah.
teachers are multitasking and very, very difficult. And I can understand, when you're dealing with teenagers, kids, it's a very stressful job. You know, a lot of it is from what I can see. I'm not a teacher, but from what I can imagine, it's just like any other person doing a job. You're trying to um, do your job, cover the bases, also keeping everyone sort of safe and out of harm's way, and then having the energy to do all of this and to deal with all these different personalities. Not easy now to, but that while also I think needing to be able as a teacher to put yourself in the kids' shoes and to be compassionate and to be empathetic. And yes, there are going to be, I'm sure, like in any thing, endeavor that we do in life, whatever job you have, you get into this like routine. And sometimes, like if you ever go to the doctor's office or speak to someone, they're so in the routine that they're not really hearing you, and you're
Mhm.
not feeling this compassion. But then you get those people, and of course, everyone has a bad day, but then you get those people who are really present, who are really there, and who really understand, and who are really compassionate. And I don't expect that from teachers 24/7, but I think we need to have some of that, and films can help with that. You talked about a discussion, teachers having discussions amongst themselves. So one of the things is showing some sort of film, maybe making it a requirement of sorts, to have teachers look at these films and have discussions with other teachers about it, and to also question their own prejudice, their own ways of thinking about things. I think in some ways we are evolving as humans. The world is changing, and our educators need to be changing as well. They need to be keeping up with the change, or else there's always going to be some sort of friction. It's not going to, I don't see how it's going to work where the world is changing, our children are changing, so are evolving. Humans are evolving, and the teachers need to evolve along with that. And I'm sure there are some, many teachers that are doing that personal inner work. And maybe there are some that aren't doing it as much. Maybe they're so focused and just getting through the day. So we need to find some room to have these discussions with teachers, and just like this podcast you're doing, it's a great way, I think, to be able to talk about things like this, to hear the teacher's point of view, to what would help you, how do you feel about this, what would help you in this situation, or hey, there's students who are catching on to the hypocrisy of, they were only seeing in some ways part of the story of Christopher Columbus, and this whole story. I don't know if that's changed, if they changed that in the school curriculum, but what I learned years ago, they didn't show the genocide of the Native Americans, the complete cruelty that were done to these people. That wasn't told when I was in school. So if a student knows that, and if a student is especially a person of color and is sitting in the classroom and being taught this, there's going to be some resistance. They're going to zone out. They're going to say, well, that's not true. And again, they may have changed the textbook. The story may be different. So I'm not up to date on it. But I think that's one of the things that are important, is having accurate information. And yes, having the teachers um, also uh, kind of voice their desire. Like, they should be able to pick up on the hypocrisy as well and say, hey, as a teacher, I don't feel right just teaching this. It's not true. So I think it would be great if we have teachers that see that this is not the whole story. I don't feel comfortable teaching my kids just this part. Like, we have to change the curriculum. We have to change some things. you know
Mhm.
and even if they can't get it changed, I think if we have teachers that are thinking in that way, that are conscious, then they're going to have a better influence on the kids that they're teaching, and the kids are going to pick up on that too. When they're having someone who they know really cares, and they know someone who's conscious about more of a broad, more a deeper connection, a deeper, um, reality of what's going on in our history and in our world.
Yeah. How we all know how powerful images are. Um, do you think there is a lack of representation, both in terms of stories of people of color in educational films, as well as a lack of representation in terms of um, storytellers, filmmakers of color, who can get our message, or the kids' messages, or their culture, who can interpret their culture in a way that would be progressive, way that would be productive and positive.
Yeah, it's as it's beginning to change little by little, in the mainstream. And I think there's more of an opening to having people of color work in all aspects of the filmmaking, and we're seeing films even in the mainstream that show that, whether it's uh, different races, genders, and things of this sort. Now, I don't know too much about what they're showing at school, so I can't really speak on that. I can speak on what I'm seeing out here. There needs to be more of that. Still the majority of what I see, shows a certain race. and
Mhm.
when I watch something like that, I just, I don't even want to watch it anymore. I'm bored. And it's not that the filmmaking isn't great. A lot of times the filmmaking is great. The set design is great. The cinematography is great. The writing is great. I'm just bored of it. It's like, oh, this again. This
Yeah.
whatever it is, King Arthur, the European hero person doing, blah blah blah, or the romantic comedy. Um, so that being said, I'm not saying that I think people of color should be represented more in these sort of mainstream Hollywood formulaic type of films. Maybe yes and no. I think part of it is it culturally accurate? You know, is like is the culture of people of color being represented, or is it just putting a person of color into a film? It's the same, same formulaic, same formula, European derived formula that's being represented, but it just to meet a certain quota and to appease a certain audience, we're going to put some people of color in it. That I don't like either, because I've seen films like that, and it just seems, for me, I don't know, it just feels disingenuous. I would rather see things that accurately represent different culture, different ways of being. There's and not, you know, I don't think that's being represented. And it doesn't have to be, you know, that African American person wearing a wig and a dress and doing a comedy and things of this sort. Like I want to see like the story of a person of color, going through their specific circumstances, in Crown Heights, in this place, or, these stories that I feel like need to be told, so that another person of color, a young person could have some identification with that, you know. So there's culture, that is not being represented, and there's a difference between the culture and the race. Having a certain race in there, but not having the culture. And I think that would need to be the writers from that culture write in authentic pieces of work, and also the filmmaker as well would need to be, from that culture as well to really truly represent it, I think.
Mhm. Have you, well, let me, and this question comes out of my, one of my observations, or, maybe better still, one of my ideas, and that is that there might already be tons of material that speaks genuinely, authentically, and positively to the culture. And there are films on the shelves that could be used. They might be a little bit dated. The characters, the cinematography, the location, and so on. But their substance um, can effectively speak to what we might be trying to, or rather, a teacher might be trying to teach particular classroom. On compassion, on empathy, on kindness, strength. Those sort of things. Do you think we should consider going backward and look at it, pull out something off the shelf? Let's say, what was it? The autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, was that it? Or um, Nothing But a Man. These are films that were made like in the 70s. I don't know, how would students respond to something like that? Or could a teacher, if with effective preparation, if you will, would students, today's students, in a let's say mid-school setting, high school setting, um, sit still long enough and be receptive enough so that they can get value from things that were already made? if that's where we have to go to look for it, if people aren't making those types of films now.
Um, I think so. I mean, I personally will watch older films, and I could, there's a teach-in moment. I mean, there's great older films, that have a lot of um, themes and things to and ideas and beliefs that one can explore. So, I mean, you can always try it out. There's so yeah, I think I don't think it necessarily has to be a a modern film. I mean, if the teacher is creative, sometimes you pick a film where like what's the film, you pick a Shirley Temple film, and it's very controversial. You ever show a
Yeah.
film like that nowadays, and just because it's so controversial, because it's so glaringly in your face, that could
Hmm.
be a good film to discuss some of our history of America that's not very attractive. So yes, it can be used. Obviously, I prefer uh, making films. Well, that's because I have a vested interest in just making. I'm a filmmaker,
As
so
do I.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I understand fully what you're saying because the Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith, which was made in 1915, which started a whole cascade of the media being used to, support the KKK and racism. That should be and it's black and white and it's grainy and it's what is it? A silent film with subtitles. It should be a must show in every school level. I would think so. Yes, I sort of answered my own question, or getting the answer to my question, that there are some films that were made, even as far back as before talkies, that we have to examine because of their influence, on the culture. And we've talked so much, and I think that there is, we could do this endlessly. Because this is a topic that, both of us have a passion for. We
Yeah.
have a passion for the kids. We have a passion for teachers. We have a passion for films and filmmaking. We have a passion for education all around, so we could just go on and on and on and on, but we obviously can't. So, any final thoughts?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me on your show, on your podcast. And I think what you're doing is great. And it was really, I didn't have anything planned for this discussion. So it is really inspiring, and I feel enthusiastic about talking about this stuff. And it just makes me feel like you're on the right track, and we are on the right track, creating these sort of communities, podcasts, using platforms like Zoom and these sort of podcasts to get people together, to have, there's something of value in having long form discussion rather than in the media. Even in the presidential debate, you get these 2 minute, sound bites, or that just sound. We're a world. It's become a world of sound bites, and which are manipulated to push an agenda. And sometimes it misrepresents different people, so you don't get to know the person, and you don't get to learn anything from that. So having a podcast like you're doing, and hopefully you have teachers on at some point, and maybe even students and things like that, would be a good place to talk and to learn and to create community, because I think it is part of this transitioning from I to the we. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ade. The Triborough Bridge used to be what used to be called the Triborough Bridge, now called the RFK Bridge, and it was called the Triborough Bridge because it went to Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx, right? So what I'm hoping with this podcast is that we have we build bridges trilaterally, teachers, students, and parents. So maybe we can build a Triborough Bridge among those three, and maybe a fourth entity, the filmmaking community. Ade Richardson, I want to thank you so much for your participation. Thank you so much for your insights and your ideas. My name is Ian Wilson, and yes, I do hope that at some point we'll have additional guests on from the educational community, teachers, students, administrators, as well as filmmakers, and that we're able to build an audience and build a community that's diverse, but who have at its core a love for education, a love for people, a love for students, and maybe we can see great things happening and build a more loving, positive, progressive world. Thanks for spending time with us on the Ian Wilson podcast with my special guest, filmmaker Ade Richardson. We hope you enjoyed our discussion on the use of films in the classroom. I'm your host, Ian Wilson. You can contact me at ian.wilson315@gmail.com. To contact Ade Richardson, please visit his website, satarifilmsllc.com. Be well.